Okay, cool. Welcome to this Quadrant community call, Tuesday, April the 2nd. And the agenda is, well, it has only one item, so everybody feel free to add more items to that list. But it's really good to have a guest. Dimitri, welcome. And I know almost nothing. I'm just back from holidays. I do know that you basically built something that has a lot of overlap with Authorino, and we're basically want to learn from each other and study each other, criticize each other, and have some good jokes about it. So I give the stage to you, and because you're gonna give us a presentation, no? I believe.
No, actually, no. I have a couple of slides, but they are so general that they are not really addressing Heimdall or what it does. It addresses basically the challenges which you try to solve, or also solving with Authorino, like you said. So there are definitely a lot of overlaps out there, and maybe a little bit of history. The journey in my case started about 6, maybe 7 years ago in the meanwhile. And it was the customer who tried to migrate from a good old embraces monolith in sense of customer identity and access management system, which has been extended over I don't know how many years to include everything possible. And you can imagine it hurts. Yeah? From the business point of view, it was pretty huge amount of millions, which they could have solved if they took other decisions before, and if they did what they actually should have to do. But it's another story. And on the journey, I was looking for a proper solution for them, and unfortunately, nothing were fitting, because you have to slice that, let's name it Goliath, in multiple pieces. One piece related for, let's say, management of devices the customers have on in their houses. The other thing was related to voucher management. The next thing was related to the actual core attribute management. The next one was related to some protocols, etc., etc., etc. And each and every system out there, if you would take it, it would just result in big bang, which was just not possible, and as usual, not possible. And in their case, where I think they have about 8 million customers around the world, so globally, and so there was a need for a solution which would solve their huge headaches. And that way, I discovered Ori. And maybe you know the company already. So they help to solve a lot of things, but one of the challenges which still were there is, okay, we had a need to kind of include information into these resulting tokens, which were previously in the same system, and now they are scattered across multiple microservices. How to achieve that? Yeah, there are many services which promise to do so, like the same Ori Keeper, like Propamerium, etc., etc. But after taking a closer look at them, nothing could help. And that was actually when I started working on Heimdall, because that was not the only one customer which faced that issues. Actually, each and every customer I'm working with have the same challenges or similar challenges. And the experiences from these projects that all of them led to the development of that component of that service. Unfortunately, I have not discovered Authorino back then, because as you may have seen on the GitHub repository, Heimdall is just 2 years old. So from the first release, it's even less than 2 years old. And Authorino, I think, is already 4, right?
It's about 4 years, even though I think it only matured, to the state that we currently see maybe about 2 years ago. So it's not that different from Heimdall.
Okay. Yeah, this is the background, and the main driving forces were to also address specific challenges you can see also on OWASP top 10, like security by default, like yeah, like many things. I don't have to repeat it here. And they were addressed in sense of the architecture, how this stuff is implemented. Like you can define your catalog of mechanisms. This is how I name that, like authentication mechanism, authorization mechanism, etc., etc. And then in your rule, you just put together what you need. Yeah, and in the basic, simplest case, it's just a reference. And there's even a more simple case. If you can define default rule, which should cover what you need actually on general, and then you have just to define those rules which deviate from that default. And even there, you can just define those things which are deviating from the default rule. And that leads to pretty huge reduction of code, which I have seen with any other options. Two of them I've named before. This is how it basically works. So I don't know whether that was your expectation about the overview. So maybe I've indeed I released today the new version of Heimdall. So it's 14.0 alpha. And among that, I released also the new documentation because that took me a lot to make it more comprehensive. So if you allow, I can shortly share my screen and show you the pieces there, because it might be much easier.
That's great. That would be great, I think. Yes, you are also more or less aware around like that like Authorino is part of a bigger thing called Kuadrant, and it's about policies on gateway API. So like there's a whole thing around the Authorino as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Cool. Yeah, you talked with Guy. You talked with each other, right? I think.
Exactly. So you should now see my screen. So the overall, so the blending page doesn't matter. It was work in progress, but the new documentation you see right now is about actually what Heimdall is. And I assume you seen the same setups here, like depicted here, that in your service code you need to do a lot of stuff. And basically, most of the time, what you end up with, or what you see also in the wild, is something like that. Or even worse, declined, which is actually the same application. So just the front end of the back end, it manages the flows, resulting with all different issues, etc. Because OpenID Connect and also related protocols are just used wrongly from my point of view. And the idea is actually to let a system like Heimdall orchestrate those things and create kind of authorization contract between the actual microservice code and the API. So basically, you can then, like with Authorino, create or enhance each and every proxy or API gateway to something better. And so this is basically the idea. And how it works, actually the same way as Authorino. You have kind of a pipeline where you can define different, in my nomenclature, mechanisms. And there are many of them, and many will come to support that client request journey. So this is how it basically works in a nutshell. And internally, even we can see here these different steps. Actually, I'm talking about stages. Right now, the stages are kind of implicit, but the next release will make them also explicit, so that you can define, for example, multiple authentication stages, and then you can combine different protocols. For example, you have client MTLS certificate for device authentication. You have a, let's say, JOT for user authentication. So you can do both in the two authentication stages, so that you can work on the results from those two authentication mechanisms in the next stages, like what I name contextualization and authorization stage, where you can call out to different systems, like collect environment information, contextual information, whatever you need, and then do the calls to any authorization user system which are actually out there. So it doesn't matter whether it's XSAML, or is it OPA, or is it OpenFGA, SpiceDB, etc. It doesn't matter, because it's all about templating. And at the end, it's just the matter of the transformation of the information collected so far here, and also from the authorization stages to whatever representation you need in your microservice. If you say, I don't care about end-to-end security, fine, you can just create a header with, for example, subject ID in it, and that's all. Or you can craft a JOT issued then by Handel, and then that's basically the contract between those two. Yeah, this is it's. I think it's the same as what you name
Wristband tokens.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but there are all other services out there which name that, for example, phantom token or things like that. So yeah, this is how it works and how you can collect, or how you can use it. Maybe in sense of a small demo, so that you see something working. I have, let's say, a POC which I created back then when I was working in that project. As you can see, there are many services like here. They just mimic what was in place there. And the, where is this tab? This tab is just a Docker Compose one. So you can see there are a lot of stuff here. And the idea is, like I said, to orchestrate things. So if let me just start it so you see what I'm talking about. Hopefully it will go pretty fast. I don't know what the performance requirements on Asurina you have. For example, my local measurements on my machine, the requests are going through in 99.5 percentile or something like that, or 97.5 percentile in about 80 to 100 microseconds with hot caches. So if Heimdall doesn't have to call anything at all, or create new jobs, because everything can be cached. Unfortunately, it has to build. Sorry for that.
No problem. Maybe I can try to fill this this time that we're waiting with some comments here. First, Dimitri was nice enough to reach out. Sorry,
Dimitri, could you mute? Because you're repeating, Guy's repeating you.
Yeah, I'm getting some feedback. Yeah, cheers. So Dimitri was nice enough to reach out about a month ago. I hadn't heard about him and all yet myself, which was a shame, right? Because as Dimitri pointed out, the similarities are uncanny, and which I'm only happy about. I think that the fact that we have some overlaps between the two projects is nothing but good news, right? Because it tells that we are totally in sync, that we are not completely off, in terms of the sort of use case we're trying to solve. But in fact, there's a whole industry trying to solve for those use cases. So that's definitely good news. But even more so, I mean, the difference between the projects, I see them as also a great opportunity, to learn and to improve both projects, and maybe even to think on ways we can partner in the future, right? For example, one difference between Authorino and Hamdol is it has to do with the design decisions, right? That the both teams made of. Houndal, for example, is not tied to Kubernetes, right? In the same way that Authorino is. So that is one of the very important differences, right? Even though technically speaking, Authorino can run outside of Kubernetes, it was not thought for that, right? Whereas Houndal, if I understand correctly, it's not kube only, right? I think that's one of the differences. Plus, Authorino decided to implement Envoy's external authorization protocol, right? So we implemented an Envoy external authorization server, right? Whereas Handle went with its own protocol, its own interface for external authorization, that is very flexible and makes it possible to integrate with all kinds of proxies and gateways. Something we also did afterwards in Autorino, right? We first implemented a gRPC protocol for external authorization that it was already enough, for integrating with other gateways, but in a more real life scenario, we didn't see like Nginx or HTTP proxy writing, modules only to integrate with Envoy protocol, right? So we had to also add the HTTP basic protocol so we could make it easier for integrations in a way that both now can integrate with all kinds of gateways and proxies. But the way we reached this was different, right? So the path we went through, to get to this point was different. So I think there's also some learnings that we can take advantage of, right? So this is great. What else? I think I pointed out also a few differences, and in your application, there's an issue, by the way, of Hamdol applying for CNCF, which I think it's great, and then congratulations on the initiative, Dimitri. I hope you guys, go smooth through the process and get accepted. That I think that's really good. So I made sure to add a few notes there on because Autorino was mentioned and Kuadrant, pretty much the same thing that I mentioned here, right? The similarities and difference between the two projects and how I think one can learn from the other. You mentioned the defaults. I think that's a very interesting one, right? Because that is one that we also do. We adopt different approaches in the two different projects, right? I very much like the way you approach that in Hamdol, and it's a lot more similar to how now we are delivering defaults in the context of Kuadrant, right? Because there is some built-in functionality for defaults in Autorino, but because Autorino indexes its configurations by host name, the very concept of defaults is also tied, to the host names. So it builds kind of a trie, right, or a tree of host names, and applies following, the more specific or more generic set of alt configurations that you have. Whereas you're already doing Hamdol a bit of a merge between configurations, right? Some things set, as defaults, merge it as more specific rules set at a more specific level, which it maps a lot more to now how we are dealing with that problem in Kuadrant and through policies. So I think that's great.
Cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, indeed, you just mentioned trie structures. This is something not yet in place in Heimdall. So basically, the matching happens via globs or regex expressions. That can be assumed as a limitation, but in the field, I've never seen setups with more than 100 rules just because of that default, because you just can limit the rules to the bare minimum. So for that reason, it was never seen as an issue. But yeah, so the next release will also bring in trie structures, and maybe I will then think about what you just said, what you have done also in Autorino, so to extend that part. So from that point of view, it would be also great if you could somehow collaborate or bring the projects together. Okay. In the meantime, it's up and running. Let me just show you stuff. So you should now see my screen again. So just started all of the services here, and if I go to the actual demo application, this is pretty simple, but you can now see already a couple of things in action, because the representation of that screen depends, of course, of whether you're logged in or not. Yeah? And maybe the interesting part will go on here. Okay, something went wrong. It's usually actually half an hour ago, I already have that in place and running, but now it doesn't work. So I think something has been broken in the configuration. Don't ask me why. Typical challenge. I think it will be problematic to deep dive with you together and try to fix it. So for that reason, I will give the stage again to you, guys, and try to solve it in the background.
No worries,
worries,
Dimitri.
no worries.
Demo God. In fact, I would like to ask you a question. I mean, how do you see that maybe the two projects could collaborate together? Uh, I mean, I have a few ideas, but I would like I'd love to hear yours.
Since both are addressing more or less the same challenges, my hope, so I haven't thought in detail how we could achieve that, but my hope was we can try to see, okay, what are the, let's say, best parts from the two projects, and try to kind of fusion them, yeah, to have, I don't know, Authorino 2, Heimdall 2, whatever you name it, and yeah, to make those things which we have already in place even better. So that's the basic idea. To be honest, and you know that already, Heimdall is baked by no company. So it's just me and a small community behind it. So the community started actually mid of last year in the summer when I started the Discord server. Before that was just me, and nowadays there are, from time to time, there are people who are also contributing to the project. And my commitment to the community is I would always love to have that project or whatever will be in the future open sourced, without things being locked out. Of course, there can be specific commercial offerings, and your guys are from Red Hat. That basically means you have to build a product out of that, and you already mentioned that. But this was my commitment, and from that point of starting point, I'm pretty sure there will be definitely an opportunity on how to proceed there and how to tackle that as well. But indeed, no details yet, because I have not taken deeper thought, or I have not thought deeply about that after our short talk in the past.
All right. Well, I deeply encourage everybody here, to check out Handel. And by the way, you have a lovely website. I very much like the website that you built. There's a lot of information there. I think that's great. So I encourage people to checking that out and learning more about it. I too see plenty of opportunities to work together, right? If not necessarily immediately merging things, but at the very least, I see an opportunity, to standardize a couple of things, right? For example, you mentioned the issuing of a JSON Web Token, right, as a way kind of to normalize and to for multiple different methods of authentication. Something that we also did in Authorino and called wristband tokens. To be honest, that is one feature that it was motivated by a specific use case we had. It was an internal one inside of Red Hat. That later on, I almost argued for removing the feature. Right. In the end, I thought it wasn't exactly how we wanted it, or we thought it would be a big thing, but in the end, it didn't. It wasn't, right. And I think currently we have an issue to replace that with something else, which is more kind of an industry standard, right? Based on OAuth. I think there's a new RFC on OAuth for token exchange that would fit better, the issuing and delegating that to an external party instead of Authorino handling itself. So maybe that is just one example, right, of things that we could try or to standardize, or one project to build more on top of the other, right? For example, right, no commitments on what I'm saying, but just an idea from the top of my head. Maybe instead of Authorino issuing that token, we could try to delegate that, or to rely on something like Heimdall, to do that. So if you're using Authorino and you want, another token, Authorino will not issue the token, but you can integrate with some third parties services that can do that for you, right? That's one example. I'm sure there are plenty of others.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll give it back to you, Thomas, and if you have comments, questions, and the rest of the team.
Yeah, Alex had one debug idea about the
Yeah, that
yellow.
was
I'm
a
not sure
totally
if that
random
was.
thing because it looked weird. But I have a question though. Like Amdahl supports like those two modes. Oh, I forgot. I was just looking at things. So the what's called the decision thing, which is more analogous to how we do it in Quadrant, right? So,
Yeah.
and I see there is the gRPC then for Envoy. Is there like more proxy specific
No,
protocols supported, or
no. So basically, all proxies out there which are not Envoy, and even that's also true for Envoy, they support the HTTP-based external out possibilities. Some of them creating their own headers for that. Best example, actually, the worst example is Nginx for that, because they don't use standard headers for that, like X forwarded blah blah blah. Instead, they do something like forwarded methods and etc. and such, really specific to Nginx. And basically, the integration happens usually based on those headers. And all of those proxies can be configured to use specific set of headers to forward the method, to forward the path, to forward the host path, etc. etc. So usually these are the three scheme, also X forwarded scheme, X forwarded host, X forwarded method, and X forwarded URI. And then you have everything. And this is also how I recommend configuring the proxy to integrate with Heimdall if this is not Envoy. If this is Envoy, just use gRPC external out capabilities of that service.
and is that a either or decision, or can I just like support all of the above?
You
So
can
the
do whatever you
gRPC,
want.
right? It's not,
Yeah.
and is it then explicit? So I forgot Nginx, right? That's the one that has the tweaks. So is this a configuration bit, or is that sort of inferred by Amdahl as it sees the request coming in?
Actually, the problem with those forwarded headers is they can be spoofed. And for that reason, you have to limit the usage of these to the bare minimum. So, and in the case of Heimdall, I took the decision I'm going only to support the standard X forwarded wildcard headers. That's all. So I'm not reacting to anything else, because otherwise, which one to use?
Right.
Hmm? So
That's
for
sort
that
of where I
reason,
was
so
heading.
there's definitely a hard decision which has been taken. Okay, only those 4 headers which I mentioned before, and if you don't want to use them, you can do it via creating a specific URL and request. So basically, you can reuse from the proxy point of view, you can reuse the method, you can reuse the path. But you cannot reuse the host part. That's basically all. So then in your rule, you will have to ignore the host part and everything else and match everything else.
So one last question, and then I'll shut up and give it to Guy. But so you support the proxy mode as well, right? So my question is, like, what do you see most being used out there? Like, I was yet another proxy. Sorry, it just seems kind of, oh my God. But
Yeah,
maybe that's what people do, right? You know, people do oh my God stuff.
Actually, I would also say, oh my God. Yeah, initially I didn't want to have that implemented, but there were many requests from different people from different projects saying, okay, we are not always in Kubernetes. We do not always want to integrate such services with our English controller. Instead, we would like to have that as a sidecar. And that was basically the reason why this proxy mode has been introduced. It has been indeed not from the beginning there. It has been implemented later on. So from the beginning, I mean from the beginning of the development. It was already there when I released the first version of Heimdall. But initially, I actually was kind of really reluctant to have that implemented, just because there are many, many proxies out there which do great things. And the idea was to have a great authorization system and not a great proxy, which so there's no goal to compete with caddy with envoy proxy, etc. Definitely not. But back to your question, because you ask, okay, how many deployment do I see they are using the proxy mode? Okay, half of the deployments are not done in Kubernetes. So people are still using just plain Docker or Docker Compose or other alternatives to that, which are more secure. And then they are just using Heimdall as a proxy, which is then publicly available to the internet via the load balancer, etc.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was about to comment on the proxy mode as well. I forgot about that, but that happens to be one of the biggest difference between the projects, right? I was also surprised by the decision of implementing the proxy mode, because we all know writing a proxy is, I mean, no picnic, right? It's kind of big thing. And in fact, we had that experience in the past, not with Autorino, but the whole Kuadrant project has its origins in another project inside, and actually a product by Red Hat, but which is an API management product where we do have a proxy, right? We do have an API gateway that combines features of authentication, authorization, and it is a proper gateway on top of Nginx, right? So we kind of know that it almost deserves a project of itself. So it was also interested to know the adoption of that feature. And not that it wasn't requested. We did have people, asking for that in Autorino. We just went a different route. We decided not to do it.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm always saying don't use this product as in a proxy mode, because you are pretty limited compared to what you can get from a regular good proxy. It has not been designed to replace them. But those who are using it in that mode are, according to my experience, pretty glad. So they don't have any challenges and any issues with that.
Cool. A very specific question, Dimitri. You mentioned the gRPC interface, right? That implements also Envoy protocol. Did you implement reflection in Heimdall for the gRPC?
In which sense reflection?
Reflection, so we can leverage tools like gRP curl without having to specify the protobuf files, right? Just one minor tip if you didn't, because I think that helps a lot for testing the service locally or even for discovery, right, in general. We didn't have in the past, but we ended up implementing in Autorino, and it was a lot easier than I thought, to implement. Maybe you already did. I didn't check.
I just used the official Envoy gRPC code, so the library which is resulting out of the compilation from the corresponding protobuf files.
Yeah, there's this thing called reflection in gRPC services in general, right? It's not an Envoy thing; it's gRPC that kind of enables another listener, another interface. So the client services can query your service and get, the actual schema for sending the gRPC messages. So it's in Golang, it's almost just another flag that you add to when you register the gRPC server, and it implements that for you. So I can point you to the reference in Autorino.
That's cool. Thank you.
Quite
It's
useful.
not in place.
All right. Anybody else? Questions to Dimitri?
Any questions for us, Dimitri?
Not from my side.
No.
I've been invited by Guy. Thank you again for that. Just to show you what I have done so far. Unfortunately, I failed to do so. Maybe next time.
Yeah, sure. No, I will have to read up on it. I think, like he said, everybody should. Yeah, and I like we just have to, I guess, let it settle down in our heads. Think of what we can do at the same, like in such a way that it's good for everybody, right, and good for both projects. And one thing I don't want to go to a place where we have to spend a lot of time working on filtering things out or extracting things or merging things, because then we both lose that time and actually adding features or developing. No, we have to find the right solution there. I don't know. I'm not done thinking. Somebody raised their hands, maybe. No, somebody posted a message. Reflector. Okay, good. Right. Okay, well, thank you. Feel free to stay. I'm not sure if there will be much more in this meeting because I don't know if anybody added anything to the notes. Let me see.
Thank you, Dimitri. Thomas, we haven't added it to the agenda, but Alex and I was chatting on something. Do you want to use this time, to discuss that, Alex, on diffusion overrides? We have roughly 20 minutes.
Yeah, well, I can certainly sort of share part of my
Sorry to
perspective.
push you under the bus here.
No,
but
no,
if you
no,
do
no,
not
no,
want
no,
it,
no,
problem.
no. I meant to do it, but because indeed, Guy and I chatted about that a little before, and like I don't expect necessarily that something comes out of this, other than possibly awareness for everybody. So, and apparently, I rehashed some of the discussion that happened before. So, but Craig isn't here, so maybe others have missed it too. So there's RFC whatever still open. So technically, I guess shouldn't have a number for the defaults and overrides. I think we really want to move forward with that thing one way or another. And so I'm actually fairly good with everything that's there. There's some stuff that makes me to different levels uneasy. But the good news is that in the proposed implementation phase, the idea is to break it down in 3 tiers or 3 phases of implementing that solution. And for the first tier, I have nothing at all. For the second tier, where we go, and I'm playing out of memory because people know me, right? I print paper and I take notes, and my notes are downstairs. So in phase 2, but some of it isn't on the PR itself. So in phase 2, it's when the idea was to introduce the strategy field, I guess, to decide how stuff should be merged in the phase of emerging. But part of that is also to include the when condition. And so there is the strategy I'm fairly fine with in general, because it's an enum, right? It's open. We can do more stuff. What we do in tier 1 is effectively atomic as the default, and you can override that default. Oh my God! With another value in strategy when you want to do the merging. But then I guess there's 2 levels of questions that come around. One is thinking, what do we plan, because of adding those things, to support targeting multiple policies of the same kind to the same resource, which, by the way, I think we'll have to do anyways because of other limitations in the CRD and cell. So that's something I think that's going to happen either way. And when we do that, and then you have multiple when clauses that say different things in multiple policies, you effectively implemented the switch case. That I think makes things to reason about yet more difficult. And then if you add to that the strategy field and how certain things will interact, it's kind of if you think in programming terms, it's a switch statement with another switch branch under each of the branch of that first switch statement. And that becomes kind of a mind-blowing thing to think about. So it's just questions, right? It's not even, I don't expect even concrete answers. It's just what we're doing is sort of raising the area of the API and the complexity that we're quote unquote imposing on users for them to deal with. Yeah, Guy.
Yeah, I've been thinking about what you said on having multiple policies targeting the same, or of a kind, multiple policies of a kind targeting the same network resource for a while. And honestly, I couldn't find as many use cases as I first thought there would be, right? Especially compared to the opposite, right? Which is having one policy that targets multiple network resources, right? Which is currently under discussion in the policy gap, right? With the from Gateway API. I think Nick Young is opening, to this change in the API. I think, judging by the last comment he shared today, actually, I think having multiple objects in the target graph might end up being accepted, right? But what you actually said, which is the other direction of cardinality, right? So multiple policies targeting the same resource. The few use cases I could think of were either because of limitations of the policy resource itself, such as it makes it easier to manage if you break that policy into multiple ones, right? Let's say there is a complexity involved in that you inherited from the types that you use to define the API, the typical problem we had with the cell validations, right? That kind of motivates us into writing simpler policies, and therefore users would create multiple resources out of those types instead of one single resource. That is one. But at the same time, I find it kind of a weak use case to justify. And the other one would be if you want to break down a policy to specialize the concerns inside of the policy. It's not much of an example for the rate limit policy, but it's definitely for the auth policy, right? Let's say if you wanted somebody to take care of authentication and another user to take care of authorization, and both of them targeting the same route or the same gateway, right? That could be a use case. But even for that one, I tend to believe that we are in a better position if we instead we define more specific kind of policies, right? That we build on top of the more generic auth policy one, namely having an authentication policy, an authorization policy that we happen to merge into some underlying single auth policy, right? So in the end, I personally could not find as many use cases for.
What about the when, though?
The when?
Do you think the when introduces that? Your switch statement, right?
If you write two policies, one or both of them
one
have
when
a when
blue,
condition,
one when red. Whatever that means.
Yeah, I wonder if that is the use case for the when, or if that is more the use case of the section name. If would you add a condition in the rules of the policy, or would you narrow the actual target of the policy in the first place?
No, that's not. Sorry, maybe my when wasn't. When the sky is blue and when the water is red. I'm not targeting it, like literally a thing that you would want to express, right? Right now, effectively what you have is apply this when that thing evaluates to true or false, right? But what if I want to rate to 100 when blue, and I want to rate to 1,000 when red?
Why would that be?
And don't get me wrong,
policies?
right? I'm not saying it makes sense, because that's the key part. The key part is what we do is we actually, and possibly or not, right, enable people to do those, express those kind of things because of the API we give them, right? And that's the kind of things where I realize I don't know. And that's why I said I don't expect an answer really from anyone. And that's also what I like about the tiered approach, is that we deliver those things in quote unquote baby steps so that we can learn from what the heck doing that involves and means for the API, right? And I guess where I want to go with all that is then the last one, which is in tier 3, which is the unset, which seems to be yet another level. No,
let's skip this one.
No, I don't want to keep it aside, because to me, that's the thing, right? We keep on complexifying the thing. And I guess my generic question, and that's the thing that makes me uneasy, is I feel the interaction between all of those features are not well understood, which I'm not blaming anybody for that, obviously, because we haven't done it, right? So I guess the weird comment that I put at the end is I'm fine with everything we're proposing, but I feel uneasy, and I still want to keep us be able to cut things out of the RFC. As I was telling you before, I think everything I'm saying is just arguing for us doing less. And hopefully leveraging some of the things that maybe we can compose or use features in the previous. And that's also what I think is positive, is I think the way that the tiering is layered sort of makes sense, sort of leaving the unset for the very end, because maybe we can do all the use cases that the unset needs with strategy. making shit up here. So,
Yeah,
so that's
obviously.
my generic thing. I don't want to go necessarily in fixing like one aspect or another, whether it's unset strategy or whatever. It's just we're blowing the surface area of the API much wider with this RFC. And that by definition means interaction between all those things. What will that mean?
I obviously cannot argue against, the motivation there, because if we can reduce the scope, it's the better, right? Obviously. When I mentioned the section name and I was trying to bring to a more concrete use case why you would use the when condition in the first place, right? But let's keep on the abstract level, as you described, right? Or with the if the sky is blue or whatever, right? I still would like to know why you would want two different policies for those two conditions. What is the actual use case? Do you see two different users writing those policies? Or do you think that for managing those policies, because they have each rule
No.
in the policy has a different condition, you would
Yeah,
prefer
that's more what I'm thinking about. Set this value to this in the case of that, but set it to this other value in the case of this other condition, right? Today, I don't see how you would do that. If we stick to the spec being like let's say the override. Let's say it's an override. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's the when part, right? If what we have is the same spec as a thing. Crap, as a direct policy, right? Like you can only express that field once, right? So you say value equals 12 in the case of this other thing that I retrieved through JSON path or whatever, right, is blue. But in the case it's red, I want to have it to 24 instead of 12. So how do I express this? I think
I see.
with what I'm reading there, the only way to do that would be to have two policies targeting the
Right.
same thing, but having a different when condition. And then I don't even want to go into what this even means when this is going to be conflicting, because the two resolve to true, the two predicates, right? So see, that's why I don't want to open this kind of worm right now and go into fleshing all those details out, because I don't think it matters per se. What we do is we give more power to people to express things that may call for more things, more side effects. And that's why I feel uneasy committing to something in a third tier, possibly like, I don't know, 12 months out or whatever, right? Because I know for a fact that I personally do not understand all the implications of the decision we make inside, say, tier 2. Does that make sense? But that's also why I like the way that it's tiered. And that was my comment in the thing, right? Let's commit to the first tier. Let's freaking do that. Let's pretty much commit on the second one, actually, right? Let's do that. And then see what we get and possibly like reevaluate things then. And then maybe, yeah, tier 3 makes absolute sense. We feel that was the right decision. Let's do it.
Yeah, maybe I'm slower than usual today, but only now I understood the use case of the one that you've just described, and now I think I'm on the same page as you are, where it's because of the name, right? Because you define a named rule, and you cannot have the two rules with the same name. That is the limitation you were describing, right? So you cannot actually have two rules with two different conditions that are two values if they are effectively the same name, the same rule, right? And currently the API does not provide a way for an else condition with a when. Right? Okay, now it's clear.
And that's why I went for the switch statement, right? Because if else, that's sort of yet again, you're just blowing the thing open, right?
And you're right. If you were able to target multiple policies of a kind targeting the same resource, that could be a way around that and to achieve the same thing. So yeah, it makes sense. So that is the first use case. I see that it's reasonable. Yeah. So if we do accept, if we do allow multiple policies of a kind targeting the same resource, how do you think that? How do we imagine that could complicate things for us, in tier 2?
Hey guys, before we take up all the time, this is an interesting conversation. I'm personally not. I'm only committed to tier 1 at this moment. Really, the rest I'm not convinced of. But anyway,
There you go.
Dimitri fixed his bug. We have 5 minutes, kind of a little bit
Oh,
more.
okay.
Yeah, I would like
So
to see the demo because
let's
I know
see
we're
the
also
demo.
not going to settle the other point.
Right.
But at least everybody
Agreed.
heard like the whole thing, and we can get into a fist fight in private, so Dimitri doesn't have to notice how I.
Two more
surrender.
things. There's a gateway API call right after this meeting. This is the European friendly one this week. And another thing would be nice, but for this week, but maybe now for next week, give some little feedback on KubeCon.
Yeah, we actually had a session last week about
Right,
that.
I was on
It's
PTO.
recorded. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you were out.
Okay,
Yeah.
then never mind. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, Dimitri, back to you. Good luck.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I have messed up with generation of the JOT previously. That's why it didn't work. Okay, let me share my screen. You should now again see my screen. So this is what you have seen before, but when I entered the articles page, it went blank. So basically, this is something like you maybe know already from things like medium.com. So, you know, this blog articles page, and it has been created just for demonstration purposes. The interesting part is actually the different types of the representation of the pages as well here, but also on the article side. So okay, here the link was broken. If I go here, it shows me something else. If you take a look here, so the idea is here to show just the header and some description without the actual content. Yeah, the content is not bigger than that here, but if I'm going to log in, or if I log in, you see things begin to change. Yeah? You have the information about when the article has been created, and you have the view on the body. And if I just click around a bit, you'll see the body will disappear sooner or later. Now it has disappeared, yeah, because we have exceeded the limit described here. Yeah? So we are in the free time, and you see it has been reflected also on that level. How does it basically work, maybe? So this is then the bigger part of the actual demo. So you were asking previously, okay, how is it done in sense of the mechanism? So this is that part, this is this catalog. And the bigger things are like the definition of this generic authenticator, which can work with actually any system which is based on cookies, as long as that system has a whom-I or something like that endpoint where one can query the information about the logged in subject. With you have a couple of JSON path expressions here to read out the information from the JSON structure returned, so that, for example, you can guarantee that the configured cache here will never exceed the limit of the actual session. So this is for cookie. This is, for example, for O2 or JOT functionality. So if you are using the opaque tokens via OIDC or JOT token via OIDC, things like that. And then in your rule, you are just going to reuse it. So we have a couple more things here, like authorizers. For example, you can see the configuration for open policy agent here. This expression you can define, okay, what is considered to be a positive or negative result. And you can define your payload. You can template a lot of things here. And this is what you can also then redefine in your rules. The pretty simple rule looks just then like that. Yeah, you have your ID, you have your match expression, the definition which methods you would like to allow, and then how does the authorization and the authentication pipeline look like. Obviously here, okay, obviously for me, it just rewrites specific things which has been defined in the default rule. The default rule can be defined here. It just allows get and post, and the authenticator is start of session, and the finalizer is JOT. So just create the JSON web token when everything is done. And if there's an error, regardless which one, just do a redirect. So this is that one to the identity management system. And in case of redirects, you can see also you can specify the if conditions. For example, it doesn't make sense to drive a redirect if the request comes from the browser, not from the browser. It's an API call. Then in that case, just do the default response for 3 or something like that. You're not authenticated, you're not authorized, and the consumer of the API will know that. And if you are in a browser, then things like that are more interesting. And in that rule, I just override the first stage, the authentication stage here. So if you compare, we have the authentication stage consisting of that authenticator only, and the finalization stage just creation of JOT. And here we just override what we need in our particular case. This is very simple rule. The more interesting one, which you've seen in action previously, is actually related to the articles. Because here we say, okay, we would like to have a Kratos session, but as a fallback, we also allow anonymous. And that was also the reason why I was able to access the article page when I was not logged in, okay, and see also the same representation we have right now. So since we exceeded the amount of the possible article reads, we don't have the body here. So it's basically the same representation compared to when I log out and go to articles. It's basically the same. And this was possible because I say, okay, fallback is that anonymous part. And in addition, what is interesting here is I can specify when particular additional information should be queried. For example, I need the subscription plan information. This is yet another service I get the information from if the subject ID is not anonymous. So basically when that has not kicked in. Same is true also, give me the information about the article statistics of that user. So you don't need to call that if the user is anonymous, because we don't collect the statistics for that. And if the request is a read request, so get, then call, use that contextualizer, but use that policy. If you remember, if we go here, it was contextualizer, OPA, we defined here a couple of placeholders like value policy, like actually only that, but we can also replace the entire payload. I just specify, okay, I need the can read policy. And if this is a write request, not shown here because it's not available on the UI level, and the subject is anonymous, then we would like to deny everything. That is just a reference to that authorizer here. Deny all. And in all other cases, so we are still in the right part, the user is authenticated, use the authorizer OPA and use the policy can write. So this is what you can then express. So this is one of the most complex rules, basically, which you can create with Heimdall. Okay, you can do more complex stuff, like adding your own claims if you want to the JOT. So just rewrite what you would like to have at the end. But this is also possible with Australian. And on the log level, I don't know whether it's interesting. So what happens when things are called? So basically, this is the trace level right now to see everything what is going on, even on the wire, when it communicates, when it reuses things from the cache. But we are actually already over time. So for that reason, that was the short demo with this short explanation also how to combine and compile things together.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll reach out if we have more questions, which for sure we will have. thank you so much. Yes, we're over time. I'm gonna stop the recording. Thank everybody for helping out.
Thank you also for your interest.
Yeah. Thanks a
Bye.
ton.